to the LULAC's Latino Leaders, the Past, the Present, and the Future Spotlight for Hispanic Heritage Month. Today, I am honored and I want to welcome Antony, better known as Tony Lopez, and say gracias for joining us today. Mr. Lopez, or Tony, is the founder and CEO for the L&L Associates, a leadership management consulting firm. Prior to this, he's worn many, many hats. There's so many of them that I prefer to let him tell us a little bit about it. So let me start by asking you, Tony, and again saying gracias. Tell me a little bit about yourself and don't leave out any of those accomplishments, please.
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, it's a privilege and an honor to be here with you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this next hour of discussion. I think it's going to be a rich discussion. It's great to be able to do this, right, at Hispanic Heritage Month, but we really should have this conversation going on all the time. But
I agree with you.
Let's wait as we warm up on the conversation. Look, a little bit on my history, which I hope my mom is looking down from heaven saying, no,
she is.
I hope she's thinking I did okay with this boy. So I am originally from Carolina, Puerto Rico. We have that in common, don't we?
Yes, we do.
So we can talk about that as well. But I grew up there till I was 16 years of age. And right around 16, my dad was working for the airlines, went to work at JFK in New York. And so we moved to New York, like so many other Boricuas have done over the past, 50 to 60 years. So I ended up doing my high school in an all-boys Catholic school in Mount St. Michael Academy in the Bronx, New York. Much to my chagrin, I wasn't interested in going to an all-boys school. That was my dad's idea. but I did that and graduated there and went on to do my undergraduate degree in Manhattan College in New York as an electrical engineer. At the same time that I did that, I was going through the Air Force ROTC program for a couple of reasons. One is my dad had served in the Air Force and I wanted to kind of follow in those footsteps. And second, because frankly, we needed the cash. And the Air Force was going to pay for my education. And they did. So they paid for my 4-year degree. And the day that I graduated with my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, I was also commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Air Force. So then I went into the Air Force and began my career thinking, I'm going to be a 20-year guy. I'm going to be a general in the Air Force one day. I'm going to retire in the military. And that was my initial ambition. And I still miss it. You can see that I still have the uniform hanging in a glass enclosure with a little hammer that says break in case of emergency, because I can't wait to get back. But I did that for about 6 years active duty and then stayed in the reserves for another 6 years while I had already started my corporate career. My first job, I was a captain in the Air Force, got out of the Air Force active duty and went to work for Johnson & Johnson.
But before you move on to the corporate world, you were in the military.
Yeah.
And you better than anybody know that the Latinos gave great contributions through the armed forces. Tell us a little bit about the leadership, and do you think it's important to have Latinos in those leadership positions in the armed forces?
Well, look, so the answer to both of those questions is yes, it's important to have Latinos in all leadership positions and we'll talk about that, right? And how the representation is or isn't happening. And in terms of, and I'll speak to Puerto Ricans specifically, but Latinos in general, relative to the U.S. military. Puerto Ricans, some interesting statistics. The percent of Puerto Ricans that serve as a percent of the total population is bigger than any other group. So Puerto Ricans serve in the military in big numbers and have done so. And we very proudly have a number of Medal of Honor recipients who have served in everything from World War II to obviously the current day.
And the famous voting.
Absolutely, right? So Puerto Ricans have always, a lot of people may not understand that Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, are U.S. citizens from birth since 1913. And so, it's not like they immigrated into the U.S. We are part of the U.S. and serve in the military proudly. So, serving in the military for me was, like I said, my dad did it as a young man in the Air Force. And I had a calling. I felt like a calling, but I also was fortunate enough to be able to do it as an officer, which is not the normal path. Normally, kids graduate high school and they go into the military, and, they go in as enlisted men and women, which is a terrific way to do it as well. I was fortunate that I got to go to college first, earn my degree, and earn my commission as an officer. And so I'm very proud of the fact that, Latinos serve in big numbers in our armed forces, in all of them, Marines, Air Force, Navy, all of them.
All right, man, I'm extremely proud of the fact that we do serve for this country.
And frankly, the leadership experiences that you gain, the experiences that you gain, the professional training that you receive is frankly above par. I mean, it's just terrific, right? And companies, and as we segue back to, so how did I end up in the corporate world, right? My corporate career was enabled significantly by my military career, right? In fact, when I was recruited by Johnson & Johnson, frankly, I wasn't trying to get a corporate job. I, in fact, wanted to stay in the military. And really, because of family reasons, didn't really want to leave. But then when my daughter was born, my first daughter was born, she's now, a mom, she's made me a grandpa 3 times over. But when she was born, it sort of changed my perspective, right? I sat there and went, wow, maybe being a general in the Air Force is not the number one priority. Maybe being a good dad, a good family man is. And so that began sort of thinking to say, well, maybe I should transition into a more corporate life, right? But I really didn't want to transition to a corporate Department of Defense kind of job, Lockheed or those kind of companies. I wanted to go to pharmaceutical, medical device, Procter & Gamble, those kinds of companies, Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies. What I found was this, they love to hire junior military officers. Definitely. They absolutely love to hire junior military officers. And a junior military officer is a military officer with less than, let's say, 10 years of experience as an officer. So typically a captain and below, maybe a major and below. And why is that? Because the military does a phenomenal job of training and developing leadership competencies, right? So these companies know they can hire these junior military officers. They come with high levels of education, at least a bachelor's, and most times their master's, because I had already done my master's degree. And they've gone through some kind of officer school, squadron officer school, or some other, command schooling. So they come in with discipline. They come in with, really good educational backgrounds. They come in with leadership qualities, and they just love to bring them in and then develop them. And I was blessed to have that opportunity. I spent 18 years at Johnson & Johnson, a number of different companies of J&J, and a couple of different areas of J&J, engineering, corporate engineering, manufacturing, sales, marketing, and eventually into general management roles. That background, that education that I received at Johnson & Johnson, I will forever be grateful for that.
And I'm glad to hear that you took advantage of the opportunity, and hopefully some of the people who will be listening to this conversation later on will follow your footsteps and take advantage of those opportunities, because many people in our community may be serving in the military and they do not take advantage of those opportunities that are offered to them in terms of education and travel. As a matter of fact, I'm happy to say my brother is also another military individual. He stayed the 20 years, retired, but Great. He just walked out the door and he was scooped up immediately.
Oh, sure.
After he retired, actually he worked for DOD on a base. They scooped him up immediately as a civilian.
Absolutely.
So Absolutely. That is something that...
the competencies and skills that the military instills, and the discipline and the loyalty and all those kind of qualities that we like, and employees are people, companies love to bring those into the organizations, right? And it becomes a part of the culture of the organization, right? We have even some ERGs, right? Employee resource groups. There's, groups for women, groups for Latinos, but they also have groups for military, for veterans, right? It's become really important. For me, it was an incredible training and an incredible way to serve and learn and receive, not a free education, because I did my time, right? I served my years in return for the education.
Exactly.
But
you went into the corporate world, and you talked about Johnson & Johnson, but I know you went into corporate and you served in different corporations. It wasn't just Johnson & Johnson. What I'm going to ask you is that I want to take you to our Hispanic representation in the corporate world. And let's focus a little bit more on Hispanic representation in the leadership positions in the corporate world. Do you feel we were properly represented? And if not, what do you suggest to make a change to this?
So the answer is a blunt no. We aren't represented. The numbers are clear, right? Those are not Tony Lopez's number. They are the data. The data are very clear. The fact is that Latinos, when I started with Johnson & Johnson, we're talking about 1991. So it seems like a really long time ago, because it was a pretty long time ago. And I was probably one of maybe 2 Latinos in an entire plant in Somerville, New Jersey, within corporate engineering, right? So clearly, and above me, none, right? And so throughout my career, often, because I was, getting promoted, as a Latino, I was one of a few in that sort of management ranks and then director ranks and then VP ranks. And when I got to be president of a company at that level, then the numbers get really minute, right? In terms of how many Latinos are fortunate enough to achieve those levels. So have they been represented? No, they haven't. Now, is it getting better? Yes, of course, it's getting better. The fact is, our numbers are, growing faster than any other number. Our buying power as a Latino community is greater than any other, et cetera. There's a lot of movement, and so things have gotten significantly better. However, here's an interesting statistic. We are 18% of the population in the United States, Latinos, right? And only 8% of Congress. 18% population, 8% of Congress. Within boards of directors of the Fortune 1000, I think we have less than 5% of the seats, all right? Less than 5% of the seats among Fortune. And many of those Fortune 1000 boards of directors of big companies, many of them, I think the number is, no, I wouldn't want to be quoted, but I know it's somewhere between 50 and 70% of them don't have one Latino.
Exactly. Those numbers are correct.
Right? So the facts are that we are not as represented as we should be. The question you asked as to why, that's the one that we should be talking about, right? Why is that the case? Well, look, in the past, we could say, well, it wasn't the case because there weren't any of us around who had the education, experiences. We weren't getting the opportunities for whatever reasons. And we can debate those reasons all day long. We can talk about them. We can feel bad about them. We can do anything. We talk about diversity and history and all sorts of things. But the facts are that we weren't represented because there weren't that many who had the right educational pedigree and experiences to make it in corporate America.
Tony, in terms of the right education, I hate to defer a little bit with that. I really believe that si lo busca, lo encuentra.
I don't know, but that's where I'm going.
Okay.
That's where I'm going. Where I'm going is that there was always this impression that you couldn't find them because there were none that were ready. Okay. Fast forward to today. The Latino Corporate Directors Association that I am a member of, okay, we have hundreds of members now. We started just a few years ago. Now there's hundreds of members of totally qualified Latino, very senior CEOs, former CEOs, presidents of company, and board members now. And that's just a sampling of the number that are available in the ethos of corporate America in the United States. So nobody is any longer saying we can't find them. No more. You can't say you can't find them. You can find us. We're available. We're here. We're ready and willing. Right?
So what do you think we need to do as a community to make them understand that estamos presentes, we're capable, we're able, we have the skills. Granted, some of us may speak with a Spanish, but acts with a Spanish accent, but accents are supposed to be sexy because when it's a French person speaking English, oh, that is so sexy. Right. So I tell people, imagine it's French, it's just as sexy. So what do we have to do? What do you think we should do? And I'm glad you brought up the board situation. What do you think we need to do? And why do you think it's essential that we have Latinos on the boards, and what do we need to do to better prepare these individuals to get to those positions?
Well, let's start with the second question first, right? Why is it important that Latinos be represented? Look, it's important that we have diversity represented at leadership of organizations, political organizations, our government, companies, our communities, our churches. Why? Because diverse organizations yield better results, period, over and out. The data, again, are very clear. A diverse organization yields better results. Why is that? Because diversity of people brings diversity of thought. Diversity of thought means more ideas in the room. More ideas in the room means more creative solutions. So we know that diverse organizations and diverse leadership is better for whether it's the products you're offering, the services you're offering, the community you serve. Okay. So first, why do we need it? Because diversity is necessary to get better results no matter what industry you're in. Why do you need Latinos specifically? Because we represent so much of the population, right? And so let me come in it from what I know best, a business perspective. From a business perspective, at Johnson & Johnson, a company that I love dearly, some years ago, not that long ago, there probably weren't any significant number of Latinos in, say, some of the marketing organizations of J&J, right? Now, what were they selling? Tylenol, baby shampoo, at one time baby diapers, and other products that were very much for home use, right? For the consumer. And the commercials didn't represent you and I. The commercials didn't represent, they were more angled, right? And so we didn't see ourselves, we didn't identify, but that's not true anymore, right? You see commercials on TV now, and most of the smart companies have realized they have to show diversity with blacks, gays, lesbians, transgender in their commercial. Why do they do that? Because they want you and I to connect with their products.
But you know what, Tony, was so funny? Whoever was in that marketing position obviously didn't understand the psychographics of the Latino community. We are loyal. If mommy used Johnson & Johnson, guess
then
what?
I'm going to use it.
I'll be using Johnson & Johnson. Right. If they had taken it from that perspective alone, they would have been winning then.
And they've come to realize that, right? So over the last, 15, 20 years, you can feel the evolution of how that's changed, of how companies are recognizing that they cannot be silent to those communities, right? And frankly, I'm very proud of the work J&J has done and other companies have done to make that transition. Now, how do you make sure that's sustainable from a business perspective, right? That is not a fad. How do you make sure it's sustainable? Well, the people who are running the organizations have to think that way, naturally, organically.
They don't have to do with the leadership. It has to do with the leadership, yes.
And that's why we need Latinos, like women and Asians and blacks, represented throughout the leadership levels of organizations in our communities and in our churches and in our government, so that the solutions that are being proposed, again, whether it's, things that are going to affect us all on healthcare or things that are going to affect us, so that those solutions represent us as a collective. So that's why it's important, right? Now, what can Latinos do specifically, right? So a couple of things. Recently I did a presentation for Hispanic Awareness Month to a hospital group down in Miami. And they asked me to speak up to them. And I said, can we title my presentation, The Power of Us as Latinos? And I made my presentation and I talked about, and it was a call to action. And I spoke about a few things. And I talked about things that I felt we as Latinos were allowing to get in our way as a collective.
Right.
And what we should do as Latinos to enable each other and support each other and contribute to one another as opposed to pulling each other down. All right. So what can we be doing? Well, individually, we can each become the best we that we can be, right? The best me that I can be. So become the most educated person you can be. I don't mean formal education exclusively. Just be well informed, right? Read, watch many news outlets. Don't watch Fox News or CNN. You got to watch them both, right? You got to really be well informed so you can form intelligent, well-formed opinions. So educate yourself. Get as much education as you can, because you and I both know.
From reliable sources.
And if you can get formal education and a degree, God bless you, go get it, right? So become educated. Be the best that you can be, right? Whatever your job you're in right now, second rule, do that really, really, really well, right?
Yes.
Make that your differentiator. Make sure that you are shining as a result of not being Latino, but as a result of your performance, right? 3, I want you to think about the fact that you have differentiators. What are they? What are your special, unique things that you have, right? And feed those. And if you're the creative type, if you're the artistic type, whatever you are, feed that energy so that you can really propel and bring your best foot forward in everything you do, right? Because none of that anybody can take away from you. A job you can lose. Companies decide to downsize, you lose a job. Hey,
true.
if you lose a job, but if you're well prepared and well educated, you'll get another. Or start your own company.
Right.
Right? So to me, Latinos first, personally, we have to take personal accountability. We have to be the best me that I can be, and you got to be the best you that, so that together we are collectively better. Right?
True.
Now, there's some things that I think we can do collectively better as well. You know, I told this story, and I think you'll maybe appreciate this story more than most. In Puerto Rico, I remember when we went to a party and we were going to have some crabs, live crabs being cooked, and they took them and put them in a big giant pot, right? Big pot. Fill the pot with not hot water, just fill the pot with water. And I remember seeing them put the live crabs, I was a boy, into the pot. And the crabs are just live and just swimming around the water. And then they light the flame. And as they light the flame, the water starts getting hot and it starts boiling up, and the crabs start getting agitated, and they start clawing on each other.
And they pull themselves down.
And one crab gets to the top, and he's just, ahí está Pepito, casi saliendo de la olla. And instead of saying to Pepito, go get him. Go turn the fire off. Go, get help, throw us a rope. No, that's not what we do. What do the rest of the crabs do? They grab Pepito and they pull him back in. And then they all drown and we eat them all.
And right? Based on that statement, Tony, that seems to be sometimes some of the challenges that we encounter as a group. We don't work together. You've been in different situations. And would you mind sharing any of those instances that you were in a similar situation or something that a challenge when you were moving through your career and things like that?
Well, look, I can, and I tell you, I thought about this when I saw one of the questions that you were raised, and this question was there. I said, I got to tell him about Judge Nelson Diaz. Judge Diaz is a Puerto Rican. He's been a judge in Philadelphia for many years. Has had a distinguished career. And he's a wonderful man. He served on a number of boards. He's still active in Philadelphia. He's a well-known judge and attorney in Philadelphia, and well-known within the Latino community of CEOs and board members. He's actually on the board of the Latino Corporate Directors Association. He wrote a book recently. It's on my shelf back here, and it's entitled "Yo no soy ni de aquí ni de allá." I'm not from here or from there. All right? Highly recommend the book. Why? The title alone says it all. Yo no soy ni de aquí ni de allá, because he was from Puerto Rico, but he lived and worked most of his life in Philadelphia. So in the Philadelphia area, they said, pero tú no eres de aquí, you're not from here, you're from there. You're from Puerto Rico. But in Puerto Rico, they used to say, well, you're not from here, you're from there, because you left. So he said, I'm a man without a country. Where am I from? Nobody wants to claim me, right? And so, interestingly enough, I had a similar experience when I was, early in my career, Johnson & Johnson, because I had left Puerto Rico as a teenage boy, 16. I had done my formal education. My English became my primary language. Yeah, of course I speak Spanish, but it isn't my predominant language. I speak English more than I speak Spanish. And frankly, I speak English better than I speak Spanish, right? Every book that I've written, and I've written 7 books, all of them are in English. None of them are in Spanish, right? So English is my business language. Spanish is my mother tongue, right?
I say English is my first language right now because of what you're saying, because of the business imperative. That's what I use for business. But my emotional language, it's Spanish.
Right, exactly. When we curse, we curse in Spanish.
Oh, yes.
Right? So when I was working at Johnson & Johnson, the early days of diversity and inclusion at J&J, which was one of the early adopters of bringing in the D&I thinking and starting workshops on diversity and inclusion, Johnson & Johnson was one of the early companies that did that in the early 1990s. And I remember going to several workshops as one of the few Latinos in the corporate world, but we also started to bring people up from the Puerto Rico plant in San Lorenzo, Puerto Rico.
I know San Lorenzo well, yes.
I was working for Ethicon at the time. And so in some of these workshops, I got for the first time to meet some of my colleagues who are Puerto Rican, lived in Puerto Rico, grew up in Puerto Rico, worked in Puerto Rico. And I remember having a conversation with one of them, won't name names in case they're still watching this program, but he said to me, well, you're not a real Puerto Rican. I kind of was, not kind of, I was offended by that. I said, I'm not a real Puerto Rican. I mean, I grew up there till I was 16. You want me to show you la mancha de plátano that I have in my back?
Oh my God,
I mean,
we were born with that.
Right? So I felt like, why would you say that? He goes, well, because you've assimilated, that's a word we should talk about. You've assimilated yourself to the corporate culture, to the Anglo-Saxon culture, to the white culture, if you will, of Johnson & Johnson, and you've kind of forgotten where you're from. And I said, I beg to differ. I'll never forget where I'm from. It'll always be important. And we all assimilate to some degree into the culture and the organizations that we work in. And we should talk about what that really means for Latino. How can you assimilate into an organizational culture without losing your authenticity? And I say that not just for Latinos. I don't care who you are.
Right.
Black, white, whatever your background, religious background is. When I hire you, I don't want you to lose that authenticity. I don't want you to lose who you are. I want you to bring that authenticity, that difference into the organization. And sure, I want you to bring it and work it within the cultural context of our company, because our company does things a certain way. We value certain things. That's why we have values on the wall. That's what we think about what a company values in terms of how they expect their employees to behave and act, and what do we value, right? But I don't want you to lose who you are as a person. In fact, I want you to bring that and add it to the richness of who we are as a company.
So that's why instead of using the term assimilate for me, I acculturated myself. In other words,
absolutely.
I picked up the cultural traits that I need to be successful without forgetting que soy boricua como el coquí.
That's right.
And similar to you, I was the opposite. I was born in the States, taken to Puerto Rico when I was 8 years old, 9. And many times I was told, pero tú no eres boricua. And I'm saying, what? But once living on the island, people, you live on the island. Right. And for whatever reason, the name helps me a little bit too. So that makes me 100% Puerto Rican. But the suffering, and it was very painful. I have to say this. Pain came when I came to the States as an adult. And my own people here are telling me I'm not, I quote, I am not, tú no eres puertorriqueña? I mean, and I'm like, excuse me? Or, tú eres, and I quote, I'm quoting you now, you're more Black than Latina. And I'm saying, how does that work? Because I haven't divided one from the other.
Look, I mean, unfortunately, sometimes we can either concern ourselves with what others want to say about us, or we can just make sure that we are branding ourselves the way we want to brand ourselves.
Exactly.
And so the term you use, acculturate, that's the more modern term, right? The assimilated term is a term that was being used in the early 90s, and then it evolved, just like diversity became diversity and inclusion, and then diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and many other words.
Right.
But in the end, we as individuals have to define our own brand, right? And who we are authentically. My next book on leadership that I'm committing to finish by the end of the draft, by the end of October, it's entirely on cultural intelligence. That's how important I think this topic is. Most people in corporate America have not heard the term cultural intelligence. We've heard about emotional intelligence.
Right. That's the word now, emotional intelligence.
And that was introduced to corporate America back about 25 years ago by Daniel Goleman in his book by the same title, Emotional Intelligence. But that's not a new idea. Psychologists have been talking about emotional intelligence for over 100 years. And we have great ways of measuring it. And in fact, most leaders today, most companies today, measure people, and leaders specifically, on their emotional intelligence index. And they should, right? We want to work for emotionally intelligent, competent people. So we want people who are IQ enough. You don't have to be Einstein, but just don't be the dumbest guy in the room. Just smart enough. Average level of smart, IQ. A high level of EQ, because that is my ability to be in tune with my emotions, be in tune with your emotions,
right,
and work effectively across those. But then there's a third index of intelligence, which, by the way, psychologists have been talking about for about 50 years in the academic circles, but it hasn't made its way yet, until now, into the corporate psyche, and that's cultural intelligence. We've been talking about diversity and inclusion, right? Those are activities and they're important, and we can talk about what that really means. But cultural intelligence is my ability to know where I came from culturally, to have some level of understanding of where you came from culturally, if you're Black or some other race or some different lesbian, gay, whatever.
Or a mixture of many of them.
You're different than me.
Right.
You come from a different political party than I. You come from a different part of the country, a different part of the world. Whatever the difference is, cultural intelligence enables me, the more I become more culturally intelligent, and the good news is you can become more culturally intelligent with training, it allows me to be in tune with who I am and how I show up, who you are and how you show up, and bridge the two most effectively. If we had more cultural intelligent people, we would have less tensions that we have in government right now. Because Democrats and Republicans, I don't care what party you're in, they're not talking with each other, they're talking past each other. They're not trying to see each other and meet each other somewhere, they're just arguing and fighting.
Cruzando los campos.
Right. And so in terms of leadership, cultural intelligence has become for me really the next topic to say, by the way, you as a leader need to get on the journey to become more culturally intelligent, more culturally sensitive, more culturally aware, so that you can be a better, organically thinking, diversity thinking leader. If you can do that, number one is you're going to attract many more people who want to work for you, because we want to work with people like that, right? And in this world we're in right now, where the talent war that's going on is critical, right? Companies right now, their biggest challenge is hiring people. Whether it's in the restaurant business, because of what's going on with COVID, or in big companies, the biggest problem right now is hiring people, competent people. Why? Because they're jumping around. Why are they jumping around? Well, because they can, number one. And number two, because if they go somewhere and they don't see people around them that they can connect with,
exactly,
they're going to move on.
Or if the company doesn't demonstrate that they value the employee by providing them with training opportunities, correct, to move forward. They recruit them, but they forget that there's a portion that you need to retain them. And to retain them, you need to develop them and make sure they get promoted to be inspired to stay in the company and continue loyal to that company.
You have just touched on the three most important things that I've been talking to boards and to leadership teams all of last year when we were talking about, I have what I call my top 10 D&I, ways of thinking. So I talk to groups and I go, let me give you my top 10 D&I imperatives. And I'll say something provocative like, you should stop recruiting diverse talent. What do you mean we should stop recruiting diverse talent? I mean, it's the hiring managers
but I know where you're going. I know where you're going. Go ahead.
And I go, why are you bothering to recruit them if you're not focusing on retaining them?
There you go.
Right? So it's not that, of course you want to recruit diverse talent. What I'm trying to get you to think about is that if you haven't created a culture in your company where they're welcomed, developed, nurtured, valued, energized, they're going to come and they're going to go. They're going to come and they're going to go.
And what they don't realize that a lot of time it's just, they can do that by just showing them that they are interested in investing in them in some way. Providing them with training, that's part of your retainment part.
Development, right? Look,
exactly.
Most professionals, I'd say the vast majority of professionals, in fact, interesting data points, right? When we do surveys and we try to understand why people leave companies, right? So we do an exit interview, an exit survey. And all of the data that I have seen for many years, there's always three reasons that people list as the top reasons for they leave. Three. One, and it's not money. It's not money. Money's number 4. The first reason is they leave their boss because they don't like working for that individual. So if they have a lousy boss, or somebody who doesn't respect them, or somebody that doesn't develop them, somebody that's holding them back, that's who they leave, number 1. Number right. 2, they leave because they don't feel they can trust or believe the management of the company. That's us. That's me. That's people like us, right? So if we're not doing our job, they go that, and they don't connect with them. They don't see themselves represented there. And the third reason that they list, they're not being developed. They're not being given training. They're not being given opportunities to expand, to grow. And then fourth, they list money.
It's money, right?
Right? And so when you think about that, you go, okay, and I've worked with Johnson & Johnson, CareFusion, Ansel Healthcare. I've a couple of other different companies, small companies. I've advised a number of different companies since I left my corporate suite jobs three years ago. I've been doing consulting work and board work and advisory work and coaching, executive coaching work. And all of the time that I've ever seen the data, it's always the same. I don't like the person I'm working for. That's why I'm leaving.
That's the number one reason.
Always. People leave people. They don't leave companies. People
Exactly.
leave people, right? And two, I don't, our management isn't really somebody that I look up to and trust. Three, I'm not being invested in, to your word, I'm not being invested in. And then number four, oh yeah, they gave me more money to go someplace else.
And sometimes that's not enough to keep you in that particular company.
Look,
especially when reason 1, 2, and 3 supersede that.
Yeah. Look, again, if you're not getting 1, 2, and 3, and somebody offers you more money, that's an easy decision, right?
Right.
If you're not getting 1, 2, and 3, if you don't work for somebody you like, if you're not getting, if you don't trust the management, and if you're not getting developed, somebody offers you just a small amount of money. The other interesting data point that convinces me that this is true is that the average raise for which people leave is less than 10% income increase.
Right.
10%. That's, that's you lose that in taxes. So it doesn't change.
It doesn't really amount to much. Sometimes you have to make those decisions and leave. And sometimes
absolutely.
And I tell people, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with you leaving if you have to leave. But make sure that you do it in the right way so it doesn't impact you in the future.
Correct. I mean, and so back to the point that you mentioned about what can we do as Latinos? Okay, well, again, prepare yourself, be well educated, be the best you can be. By the way, let's really support and enable each other as a community, right? Let's celebrate each other's accomplishments as opposed to
pulling each other down.
¿Quién tú te crees que tú eres? Right? Who do you think you are writing that?
Mira esta.
¿Quién se cree ella? Right? That's exactly the opposite of what we need to be doing, right? We need to be proud and highlight people who achieve, but then when you're the one that gets lucky enough to be there, you better be reaching down and grabbing as many as you can and pulling them up.
Could you repeat that again, please?
So when you are fortunate to get to wherever you get, your job is to reach down and pull up as many as you possibly can, right?
And we need to learn to do that.
When you said to me, hey, Tony, I do a leadership thing in Puerto Rico, and I said to you, you had me at hello. You had me at hello, right? Because you were saying, hey, I need speakers, but I ain't got a lot of money because we're not for profit, right? Yeah. Well, okay.
Well, people already know that I'm good at begging, so we're good at that.
and the reason that, look, I think I get paid well for what I do for other clients, and that's fine.
And you remember to give back.
And I have to give back. That's the important part is that, yeah, sure, I want to make money. Sure, I want to get paid. Sure, I want to do well for my family. But there's got to be a part of me that is dedicated to just pulling and pulling and pulling. Whether you serve, and the next thing we can do as individuals is get involved, right? Whether you serve on a Hispanica, the National Society of Hispanic MBAs, or whether you join, which is a terrific organization led by.
And I know you were part of that organization too.
I was lucky to be on the board for a number of years. Now led by Tomas Sabino, who's the CEO there, and that organization goes on. Alpha, Association of Latino Professionals, led by Damien. I forget his last name right now. There's a number of organizations. Get involved with your community. Get involved within the ERGs of your company. Be visible. Be active. Be proactive. Don't be a victim to the process. Be a part of the process, right? So before we can look outside and say, oh, nos están aguantando, they're not giving me this, they're not giving me that. You know what? Let's look in the mirror and see what we can do.
Exactly.
Enable ourselves and enable each other. Don't be the crabs. Don't be the crabs pulling each other down. Push people up.
Tony, you've given us a lot of information, and it's excellent information, and we happen to agree on many of the issues. The one thing I wanted to ask you, because you've been lucky enough, or we've been lucky enough to be successful in our fields, but how did you integrate your culture, your heritage, or your being Latino into your leadership techniques, and not only as a CEO in all aspects of your life?
I've had that question asked to me before. And in fact, one of the books I wrote is called Legacy Woman, The Legacy Leader as Superhero. And somebody asked me, so is it a book about women leaders? And I said, no, it's a book about leadership. Well, why did you title it Legacy Woman? It could have been Legacy Man, because I created a superhero character called Legacy Woman. But there's also Legacy Man. Mm-hmm. And so they asked me, well, why did you title it Legacy Woman? I said, because women buy more books than men. That's why. But the point that I'm making is that, to me, leadership, the competencies, the skills, and the way leaders behave is agnostic, indifferent to what sector you're in, whether it's private or public. Look, good leaders act with courage. They act with integrity. They act with character. They're loyal to those people who they're blessed to lead. They are truthful and credible. Those are not qualities that are specific to banking or government or industry or manufacturing. Those are competencies that are agnostic, indifferent to where you lead, right? Whether it's public, private, church or non-church. Leadership is about those qualities, those competencies, which is what my books are about. Now, what's beautiful for me about being a Latino man is that I have some benefits that come with being a Latino man. One is I speak more than one language. Well, that's an advantage, okay? Two is I look at the world through a different set of filters, right? I was raised with a particular set of values, being more humble than maybe others, to be more fair-minded perhaps than other cultures. So those values that are embedded in me by mom, dad, church, group, growing up in Puerto Rico, whatever, all those values are part of who I am. And what I've learned to do, Sarah, is leverage those to my advantage as a leader, right? I don't try to not use those. I don't try not to be emotional. I don't try not to use my hands when I speak, right?
I try not to, but it's just, I can't. It's so, here we go. It's so much, I can express myself so much better. But I want to touch upon a word that you use, humble. That's something in our DNA that they teach us. No te la eches, tienes que ser humilde, no te la estés echando, whatever. But, however, in certain situations, we have to be the opposite. For example, with the federal government. When you're filling out a resume for the federal government, you're supposed to toot your own horn.
That's
and
right.
It is sometimes when I'm working with the Latino community, it is a challenge for them because I can't tell them because they're going to think I'm showing off. And I tell them, you have to show off here. So that's something that I try to make people who don't understand some of those traits in the Latino community, that they are used to not being show off. Not to show off. We are taught to be humble.
Yes. Let me add a couple of words because people who know me know that I often say leaders should walk humbly but confidently.
Exactly.
But confidently. Okay. Look.
I'm going to steal that, by the way.
Yeah. Humble but confident. Okay. You don't have to go. You don't have to be King Kong. Okay. You can let your performance, your track record, your CV somewhat speak for you. However, when you go for a job interview, right, you should go there to get that job. And you should go there with confidence. And you should be, not that you can't be humble in your way. We never want to be arrogant. But you should be confident that you can do the job and you should demand for the opportunity to get the job, right? And again, this is where we can enable each other as well. Because if I know you, I should be speaking on your behalf as loudly as I can and as proudly as I can, right? And so when we can promote each other, we should. But you individually, you got to be willing to promote yourself, particularly Latinas, who don't speak up often enough about their accomplishments.
But that's changing. Well. That's changing.
That's changed, and I'm glad to see it change. It's changed quite a bit, but it still has a ways to go, right? It still has a ways. Whoever you are, now, make sure you can back up what you're saying.
Exactly. That's what I tell them.
Right?
As long as you have the skill and you're talking about something that you know about, you can do this. I want to cite an example, and I'm sorry I'm using him, Roberto Clemente.
I love him.
One of the best baseball players, I don't care what anybody says, hands down, in the history. Mm-hmm. A lot of times they would think he was arrogant, but it wasn't arrogance. he was proud of what he can do. And when he spoke about, don't worry about it, we're going to win this game because I'm going to hit a home run. They said, look at him. Who the hell does he think he is? Guess what? He was talking with confidence. It wasn't that he was showing off. And by the way, he would always come through anyway. So it's something that we have to teach our people to that humble, but with confidence.
Look, yes, I agree. And I had a gentleman who's still a very good friend. He's been a mentor of mine for many years, a black man, a former retired J&J executive. His name is Jesse Penn. I love that man, and I've always admired him for years and years and years. When I had the opportunity to go become the head of a large $750 million business at CareFusion Respiratory Systems out in California, it was my first big job. It was my first, I had run a $100 million business, but this was a big one, right? With 4,000 employees, I was going to be the guy in charge. That was a big deal. And it was a little scary. So I did what I'd done probably for the past 20 years before I took any job. I called Jesse. Jesse, here's what's happening. What do you think? And I told him about the job. And I remember speaking for like 5 minutes and rambling. Yeah, the job was done in California. And I told him all about what the thing was. And he patiently listened. And Jesse has a very soft-spoken way. He goes, so what's your question? And I said, well, should I take the job? And he goes, of course. And I said, well, you say that like it's no question. He goes, no, let me say it differently. You have to take the job. And I said, well, wait, what do you mean I gotta take the job? I don't have to take it. He says, no, you have to take the job. I said, wait a minute, Jesse, tell me why I have to take a job. And he says, tell me something. Name as many as you can Puerto Ricans who reached that level of success in corporate America. Name them by name. And of course I couldn't. Now, that doesn't mean they're not there. I just couldn't name them.
But you don't know them, yeah.
I don't know them, right? There's
not many. There's not many.
And he goes, you see my point? You have no choice. You have to take that job. You have to do well on it. You have to represent. And you got to be that model to show others like you that they can get there. And I said, wow, you're putting all that on me? He goes, yeah, I'm putting all that on you.
But you know what? If he had said it a different way, like for example, how many Latinos? Now you have all of us. He made it a little tinier for you to make it a little bit more comfortable. Because if he had thrown out the Latino word, ay, Dios mío, that's everybody from South America, Central America.
Luckily for us, the numbers have gotten much better. And proudly, I'm happy to say that again, every day I see an announcement of another Latino rising star who's become, CEO of this or board member of that. And I think the Latino Corporate Direct Association under Esther Aguilera and the board there have done a tremendous job of putting us on the radar, putting us on the map. I'm so proud of that. They've done so well. They've done so well. And the whole team, Ozzy and Carmen, they have a great small, like you said, you're a team of one. They're not a very large team, but they're a very powerful team. And they've done great work to make sure that the Latino voices and the Latino leaders are not just heard, but they're being recognized and they're being challenged. And so I would say to all of us who are listening, to all the Latinos, listen, it's on us. It's on us individually, but it's on us collectively.
Right.
We have to make sure that we work as a collective for the betterment of everyone, but don't be ashamed or afraid of your own success. And by all means, be proud of it, like Roberto was, right? Like I am. Look, I know I'm blessed. I know I have achieved things that I frankly never thought I would. I'm blessed, I'm happy, and I've been very, very fortunate. Now,
so let me just, so we can wrap this up, even though I don't want to wrap it up, but we have to. There's a lot of people who want to get to the positions you've been in or higher or whatever. I'm still keeping my fingers crossed to have the first Latino president of the United States, and we're going to get there. I just hope it's during my lifetime. What would you say to all of those aspiring leaders that are taking their first path into their journey? What advice would you give them?
Well, the same thing you might have heard others have said in the past. Number one, you truly have to not allow anyone put any limits on you, right? Look, people say, well, Tony, I want to achieve what you achieve. I said, oh man, you're aiming too low. You got to achieve much higher. I got to a nice spot, but there's lots of room ahead of me. lots of up. I mean, I am, I'll say mildly successful compared to where people should be aspiring to become. So don't aim middle. Aim as high as you can go in whatever it is you want to go. Don't go there because everybody else says you go there. Make sure it's what you want to do, but don't let anybody put any limitations on it, number one. Number two, educate yourself, educate yourself, educate yourself. Nobody can take away our education. They can take away a lot of other things. They can call us names. They can prevent us from getting jobs, but they cannot deny you your education. What you know up here, nobody can steal from you, all right? Number three, you gotta have that attitude that says, I'm gonna go get it done. And you hear guys like Pitbull, very successful singer, comes from the streets, if you will. But what does he say? He has all those great sayings that he incorporates into his songs, right? One of the things is, the harder I work, the luckier I get. You can't rely on luck. You gotta work your butt off. Okay?
Exactly.
And don't be afraid to work hard, and don't be afraid to fail. I have failed many, many, many times.
But that motivates you to keep going.
And right, you can either let the failure defeat you, or you can say, nope, I'm gonna turn that around. Look, why do I write? I write because I think there's something that I have to say, and something that I have to teach, something that I have to impart. But I also write because my mom said to me, before she died, she goes, I'm not happy with you. You never published any of your work. And I said, well, Mom, I'll get it done. And luckily, I was able to publish my first book before she died, nearly 20 years ago, right? And I was able to hand it to her. Whatever your motivator is, whatever is going to drive you, whatever is going to be that thing, get it. And for me, I have a 5-year-old granddaughter and a 3-year-old grandson and a 7-month-old grandchild. For me, and that's the reason my books are titled Legacy, for me, it's entirely about what people will remember, what they will remember about me when I'm gone, right? What will they say about me? What will my legacy be? And here's what you never see in a tombstone. Great businessman, millionaire, billionaire, you don't see that in a tombstone. You see great father, great husband, loyal son,
right.
Loyal friend.
Right.
So what do you want to be remembered for? And as a leader, leave the place you're in better than it was before you got there.
And lead by example too.
Be a servant leader. Be a legacy leader. There you go. That's what I'm going to end with. Be a legacy.
Well, Tony, it's been great talking to you, but before you go, I'm going to take you a little bit, deviate you a little bit from the leadership stuff. We're going through a lot of things currently. And is there a message you want to send to the public in general? Maybe not necessarily about leadership, but a message in general, especially to our community, because everything that's going on is impacting our community tremendously, especially us in Florida.
It is. I tell you, I said, if I ever run for office, my platform is going to be, can we just moderate our tone with each other? Can we just go back to civility in how we talk about things with each other? Can we just respect each other's viewpoints? And I don't have to agree with you, but I don't have to be disagreeable with you. You may see it red, I may see it blue, but it doesn't mean you're wrong and you're bad and evil, nor am I, right? I'm not going to question your loyalty and your patriotism and your desires. So if we could just tone down the rhetoric, tone down the vile differences, and you think about topics that are really important, immigration, right? And other such topics that are so important, race issues in our country still today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, today.
Right? I mean, think about it. We saw last year and are seeing still now things that we didn't see since the 60s, right? And a whole new generation is growing up with it. We really should, I hope, start to have a more civil discourse with each other, a more civil tone with each other, a more respectful tone with each other. Let's respect each other's differences and opinions, and then let's work towards common solutions respectfully, right? I don't have to agree with you, but let's agree on where we're going.
Exactly, and disagree to disagree, but in a civil manner.
Look, I teach teams that I'm working with and leaders that I'm working with, says don't waste your time trying to get to agreement. Focus on getting to alignment. You and I can be aligned on the fact that the immigration system, for example, in the United States, need to be better. No, I don't think you'll find anybody who would argue with that statement. What we could argue about, and do argue too much about, is what's wrong with it and how we're going to fix it. Okay? But can we at least agree that it needs to be fixed? And then maybe we have a chance of coming up with a solution that we can all get behind. I know that's oversimplifying things, but if you
all right, Tony, thank you so much for the message. It was great chatting with you. Great conversation. Like I said to you before, informally, it's always good to talk to un compatriota. And I am very proud of your accomplishments, as I know many other people are. And since you say that you always give back, I'm hoping you will join us next year in Puerto Rico during the 2022 LULAC convention as one of my speakers. So can I get a yes from you right now here in public on TV?
You have a yes from me, because I haven't been back to my Isla del Encanto in a few years. So let's go.
Well, you will be receiving a formal invitation from me in the near future. Ladies and gentlemen, we just had our conversation with Tony, un amigo, un líder, un patriota. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Cuídate. Chao.
Ciao.